April 13th, 1945, 11:20 at night. The outskirts of Zwolle, Netherlands. A one-eyed Canadian soldier named Léo Major crouched in the darkness at the edge of the city. His partner, Willie Arsenault, knelt beside him. Both men were breathing hard. Their breath made little clouds in the cold night air. Major reached up and pulled down his black eye patch. He adjusted it over his left eye, the one that didn't work anymore. A German grenade had taken that eye almost a year ago on D-Day. The doctors had wanted to send him home. Major had refused. He told them one eye was enough to aim a rifle. Tonight, he would need to aim very carefully. He checked his weapons one more time. His Sten gun felt heavy in his hands. The metal was cold even through his gloves. He had 3 extra magazines in his coat pockets. Grenades filled every other pocket he had. More grenades sat in a canvas sack at his feet, 8 of them, maybe 9. He patted his chest, his sides, making sure everything was where he needed it. Willie did the same beside him. In the distance, they could hear German voices. Boots walked on cobblestone streets. Somewhere a truck engine rumbled. The sounds floated across the empty fields between them and the city. Major knew what those sounds meant. 88 German SS troops held Zwolle. The SS were Hitler's best soldiers. They were mean. They were well armed. And they were trapped inside a city with 50,000 Dutch people. This is the story of how one Canadian soldier, fighting with only one eye, liberated an entire city by himself. It's the story of how he saved 50,000 people from bombs and fire by making the Germans think a whole army was coming for them. It wasn't the first time Léo Major had done something impossible. 6 months earlier, he had captured 93 German soldiers all by himself in one night. But tonight would be different. Tonight would be bigger. And tonight, not everyone would make it home. The war was almost over. Everyone knew it. Adolf Hitler sat in his bunker in Berlin, watching his empire burn. The 1st Canadian Army was pushing through the Netherlands, freeing Dutch cities one by one. The Dutch people were starving. The Germans had taken all their food during the winter. 20,000 Dutch civilians had already died of hunger. Every day the Canadians moved faster, trying to save more lives. Zwolle was next. The city sat at a crossroads. Important roads met there. Bridges crossed the river. Whoever controlled Zwolle controlled the roads east. The Canadian commanders wanted it. They wanted it badly. They wanted it fast. But there was a problem. The Germans were dug in. They had machine guns. They had fortified buildings. They had set up headquarters in the city center. The Gestapo, Hitler's secret police, had taken over the main government building. If the Canadians attacked straight on, hundreds of soldiers would die, maybe thousands. So the commanders had made a plan. At dawn, the artillery would start firing. Hundreds of big guns would pound Zwolle until the Germans ran or died. The shells would smash buildings. They would collapse walls. They would start fires. The city would burn, and the 50,000 people living there would burn with it. Unless someone could go in first and count the Germans. Unless someone could find out exactly where they were and how strong. Unless 2 men could sneak into an occupied city, gather information, and make it back alive before dawn. That's why Major and Willie were here. They had orders to scout, go in quiet, look around, count the enemy, get back by 3 in the morning. If they didn't report back, the artillery would fire. The commanders couldn't wait. The war was almost over, but it wasn't over yet. They had less than 4 hours. 4 hours to cross into enemy territory, move through streets full of German patrols, spy on SS positions, and get back. It should have been impossible, but Major had done impossible things before. He looked over at Willie. His friend's face was hard to see in the darkness, but Major knew he was scared. They were both scared. Only stupid men weren't scared. but Willie had volunteered anyway. When Major asked for someone to come with him, Willie had raised his hand first. That's what friends did. The night was cold, maybe just above freezing. A light rain had started to fall. The cobblestones in the city would be slick, dangerous, easy to slip. The rain made soft, pattering sounds on the ground. It would help hide the noise of their boots, but it would also make them cold. Cold made you slow. Slow made you dead. Major could see the dark shapes of buildings ahead. Zwolle was completely dark. No lights anywhere. The Germans enforced a strict blackout. No one could turn on a lamp. No one could light a candle. The city was a black hole in front of them. Somewhere in that darkness, 88 armed men waited. Men who would shoot first and ask questions never. The Germans were planning to blow the bridges when they retreated. They wanted to destroy everything useful before the Canadians arrived. That's what they always did. Burn it, break it, leave nothing behind. The Dutch people would be left with rubble and ash. Major felt the anger rise in his chest. He had seen what the Germans did. He had walked through French villages they'd destroyed. He had found bodies in Belgian towns. The Dutch had fed him, hidden him, risked their lives to help Canadian soldiers. Now, 50,000 of them were about to die because some general thought artillery was easier than sending men in. Unless 2 men could make a difference. Unless the impossible could happen one more time. Dawn was 6 hours away. The artillery commanders were probably checking their guns right now, loading shells, calculating distances. At first light, they would fire. The city would disappear under smoke and fire. Major stood up. Willie stood beside him. They looked at each other one last time in the darkness. No words. They had already said everything back at camp. They checked their weapons again. Major adjusted his eye patch. He touched the grenades in his pockets, heavy, ready. How could 2 men, or even 1, possibly convince a German garrison to abandon an entire city? Léo Major was born in 1921 in New Bedford, Massachusetts. His parents were French Canadians who had crossed the border looking for work. When Léo was young, the Great Depression hit. Factories closed. Jobs disappeared. His family packed everything they owned and moved back to Montreal. Léo grew up poor. He grew up tough. He grew up speaking French at home and learning English in the streets. In 1940, when Léo was 19 years old, he walked into a Canadian Army recruiting office. War had started in Europe. Hitler was taking over country after country. England was fighting alone. Canada needed soldiers. The recruiter looked at the skinny French-Canadian kid and signed him up. They sent him to a unit called Le Régiment de la Chaudière. It was a French-Canadian regiment. Everyone spoke French. Everyone was from Quebec. They became his brothers. The other soldiers started calling him names. Not mean names. Soldier names. They called him the one-man army because he liked to go off on missions alone. They called him the madman of the Chaudière because he did things that seemed crazy but somehow always worked. Major liked the names. He earned them, but he wasn't always a one-eyed soldier. That came later. That came on the worst day of the war. June 6th, 1944. D-Day. The beaches of Normandy, France. Major hit the beach with his regiment in the second wave. Bullets flew everywhere. Shells exploded in the sand. The noise was so loud you couldn't think. Men fell left and right. Major kept moving forward. That's what you did. You moved forward, or you died where you stood. During the fighting, a German soldier threw a phosphorus grenade. Phosphorus burns white hot. It sticks to skin and keeps burning. The grenade exploded right in front of Major's face. The burning chemicals hit him. His left eye felt like someone had shoved a hot poker into it. The pain was worse than anything he'd ever felt. He screamed. He fell. Blood ran down his face. He couldn't see out of his left eye. He could barely see out of his right. Medics dragged him to the aid station. The doctors looked at his eye. They shook their heads. The eye was gone, cooked, destroyed. Burns covered half his face. They told him he was going home. They told him the war was over for him. They said he'd get medals for his service. He could go back to Canada with honor. Major refused. He told the doctors he had one eye left. One eye was enough to aim a rifle. One eye was enough to kill Germans. He wasn't going home, the doctors argued. Major didn't care. He walked out of the aid station and went back to his unit. They gave him a black eye patch. He put it on and kept fighting. The commanders wanted to give him medals for D-Day. Major refused those too. He said the general who would pin them on was incompetent. He said that generals' bad orders had cost too many Canadian lives. Major wouldn't accept medals from a man he didn't respect. The officers were shocked. Soldiers didn't talk like that. But Major didn't care about rules when the rules were stupid. So he kept fighting, one eye, one rifle, through France, through Belgium, into the Netherlands. And he did something in October 1944 that made everyone realize this one-eyed soldier was special. It was the Battle of the Scheldt Estuary. The Canadians were trying to open up a waterway so supply ships could reach the armies. Major's unit was pinned down by German fire. They needed to know where all the German positions were. Major volunteered to go look. At night, alone, behind enemy lines. He snuck past the German guards. He found their command post. Instead of just looking, he grabbed a German officer, put a gun to his head, made him wake up another officer, then another. One by one, Major collected German officers in the darkness. He tied their hands. He made them wake up their men. Then he marched the whole group back to Canadian lines at gunpoint. 93 German soldiers, one Canadian with one eye and one gun. The officers couldn't believe it. 93 prisoners. Not a shot fired. Major just shrugged. He said it was easy if you knew how scared people were in the dark. That's when his reputation really started. That's when commanders started asking for him when they needed something impossible done. That's when the one-man army stopped being just a nickname. Now it was April 1945. The Netherlands was still suffering. The winter of 1944 to 1945 had been horrible. The Dutch people called it the Hunger Winter. The Hunger Winter. The Germans had taken all the food. They had blocked all the supply roads. Dutch families ate tulip bulbs to survive. They ate grass. They ate anything. 20,000 people had died of starvation. Children's stomachs were swollen from hunger. Old people just lay down and didn't get up again. The Canadian Army was racing to liberate the rest of the Netherlands. Every day mattered. Every hour meant more Dutch people might die. But going fast meant taking risks. It meant sending artillery instead of soldiers. It meant destroying cities to save time. That's why Major and Willie were here. Willie Arsenal was Major's best friend in the regiment. He was from New Brunswick, another French Canadian. They had fought together since Normandy. When Major asked for someone to volunteer for this mission, Willie's hand went up first. He didn't hesitate. He knew it was dangerous. He knew they might not come back. But that's what friends did. They went together into the darkness. Both men knew the odds were terrible. 2 men against 88 SS troops in a city they didn't know. In the dark, with a deadline. If they failed, 50,000 people would wake up to artillery shells crashing through their roofs. If they died, no one would even know until dawn. Major checked his watch. 11:20 p.m., time to move. He looked at Willie one more time. His friend nodded. They started walking toward the dark city ahead. Major and Willie crossed into Zwolle at 11:30 p.m. They moved slowly, carefully, staying close to the walls of buildings. The city was completely dark. No moon tonight, no stars. Just thick clouds and that cold rain coming down. Their boots made soft sounds on the wet cobblestones. Every sound seemed too loud. Every breath seemed too loud. The streets were narrow, really narrow. Medieval narrow. Buildings pressed close on both sides. In some places, Major could reach out and touch walls on both sides at once. The streets twisted and turned like a maze, perfect for ambushes, perfect for getting lost, perfect for dying. The temperature was just above freezing, maybe 35 degrees. The rain made it feel colder. Water dripped from rooftops. It ran in little streams between the cobblestones. Major's uniform was getting wet. The cold was starting to seep into his bones. He ignored it. Cold was just a feeling. Feelings didn't matter when Germans might be around any corner. They had their orders. Scout the German positions. Count how many soldiers. Find out where they were strongest. Report back by 3 in the morning. Simple orders. Almost impossible to follow. Major led the way. His one good eye strained to see in the darkness. Willie followed close behind. They communicated with hand signals. No talking. Sound carried in empty streets. One voice could mean death. They heard German voices before they saw anything. Somewhere ahead, men were talking, speaking German, laughing about something. The sound echoed off the stone walls. Major held up his fist. Willie stopped. They pressed against a wall and waited, listened. 4 voices, maybe 5. Coming from around the next corner. The smell of cigarette smoke drifted through the rain. German soldiers on patrol taking a break. Not expecting trouble, not worried. Why would they be? This was their city. They had held it for months. No Canadians had gotten close yet. Major looked at Willie. He pointed to himself, then to the left. He pointed at Willie, then to the right. They would circle around, attack from 2 sides at once. Willie nodded. He understood. They had done this before. Major crept forward. His finger rested on the trigger of his Sten gun. He reached the corner, peeked around. 4 German soldiers stood in a doorway, trying to stay out of the rain. They had propped their rifles against the wall. They were smoking, relaxed, not ready. Major stepped around the corner. Willie stepped out from the other side at the same moment. The Germans didn't even have time to reach for their guns. Major and Willie fired. The sound was huge in the narrow street, like thunder crashing between the stone walls. The 4 Germans went down in seconds, just collapsed in the doorway. But the noise, oh, the noise. Gunfire echoed through the whole city. Dogs started barking. Somewhere in the distance, a whistle blew. German voices shouted in alarm. Boots started running on cobblestones. They were coming. Major and Willie ran. They ducked into an alley, turned down another street. The city was a maze, but that was good now. The Germans didn't know where the shots came from. They were searching everywhere. Major and Willie kept moving, putting distance between themselves and the dead patrol. They ran for 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, they stopped in a dark alley to catch their breath. Major checked his watch. Midnight. They had been in the city for 30 minutes. They'd killed 4 Germans, but now the whole garrison was alert. Every soldier in Zwolle would be looking for them now. Willie leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Major was about to signal they should keep moving when he heard it. Boots, close, too close. Coming from the street they'd just left. He grabbed Willie's arm, started to pull him deeper into the alley. But the Germans were already there. They came around the corner fast. A whole patrol. 6 or 7 men. They had a machine gun. The machine gun opened fire before Major could react. The muzzle flash lit up the alley like lightning. Bullets hit the wall behind them, hit the ground. Hit Willie. Major saw his friend jerk backward. Once. Twice. 3 times. Willie's eyes went wide. He tried to say something, but no words came out. He slid down the wall and sat hard on the ground. His rifle clattered on the cobblestones. Major fired back. He emptied his entire magazine at the Germans. They scattered, diving for cover. In that moment, Major dragged Willie into a doorway. He pulled him close. Willie's chest was covered in blood. Dark blood. Too much blood. Willie looked up at Major. He tried to smile. He opened his mouth. Then his eyes went somewhere else, somewhere far away. He stopped breathing, just like that. One moment he was there. The next moment he wasn't. Major crouched there in the dark doorway, holding his dead friend. The rain kept falling. German voices shouted nearby. They were organizing, searching, coming closer. Major should run. He should go now, before they found him. That's what his training said. That's what made sense. But something broke inside him. Or maybe something focused. Willie was dead. His best friend since Normandy was dead in his arms. And for what? So the generals could fire their artillery at dawn? So they could destroy this city and everyone in it? Major laid Willie down gently. He closed his friend's eyes. Then he checked his weapons. 3 magazines left for his Sten gun. He grabbed the German MP40 from the patrol they'd killed earlier. That gave him more ammunition. The sack of grenades was still there. 8 grenades. Maybe enough. He looked toward the city center, toward where the German headquarters would be, toward where 88 SS troops thought they were safe. Major made a decision right there in that doorway with his dead friend at his feet. He wasn't going back to report. He wasn't going to let the artillery destroy this city. And he wasn't going to let Willie die for nothing. He was going to take this city himself. All of it. Alone. It was insane. It was impossible. It was suicide. But Major was beyond caring about possible or impossible. He checked his watch one more time. 12:20 a.m. He had until dawn. That gave him maybe 5 hours to do something no one had ever done before. He started running toward the center of the city, toward the German positions, toward the impossible. Major reached the first big German position at 12:45 in the morning. The city hall, it was a large stone building in the center of town. 3 stories tall with big windows. Light showed through cracks in the blackout curtains. Germans were inside, maybe 20 of them, SS troops, the best Hitler had. Major circled around the building, staying in the shadows. His boots were quiet on the wet stones. He could hear voices inside, German voices talking, laughing. They felt safe. They thought no Canadians could reach them here. They were wrong. He pulled the first grenade from his sack, pulled the pin. The pin made a small clink sound. Major counted to 2, then threw it through a ground floor window. The glass shattered. Someone inside yelled. Then the grenade exploded. The blast was huge. It shook the walls. Screams came from inside. Men shouting in German. Panic. Major didn't stop. He ran to the opposite side of the building. He had maybe 10 seconds before they figured out where the grenade came from. He raised his Sten gun and fired a full magazine into the second-floor windows. The gun made its chattering sound. Brass shell casings bounced on the cobblestones. More glass breaking, more shouting inside. He pulled another grenade, threw it through a different window, ran to another side of the building. This time he used the German MP40 he'd taken from the patrol. Different sound, different gun. The Germans inside would hear different weapons from different directions. They would think multiple soldiers were attacking, multiple positions, an ambush. Inside the city hall, the SS troops were scrambling. Major could hear them yelling. Someone was screaming orders, boots running on wooden floors. They were trying to figure out what was happening, how many attackers, where they were coming from. In the darkness and chaos and smoke, they couldn't tell it was just one man. Major kept moving, never staying in one place, throw grenade, run, fire gun, run, throw grenade, run. He circled the building 3 times in 5 minutes. The Germans inside probably thought 20 men were attacking them. Maybe more. Then Major did something crazy. He started shouting, in English, loud. "Second platoon, move left," he yelled. Then he ran to another position. "Third squad, covering fire." Different voice. Different direction. He made it sound like he was giving orders to other soldiers. Soldiers that didn't exist. Inside, a German radio operator was talking frantically into his radio. Major could hear him through the broken windows. "Under attack! Heavy attack! Multiple positions! Send help!" The panic in his voice was real. Major checked his grenades, 4 left. He needed to save some for other targets. He fired one more burst from the Sten gun, then melted back into the darkness. Behind him, the city hall was in chaos. Germans running everywhere, none of them following him. They were too busy trying to defend against an attack from multiple directions that wasn't happening. Major ran through the dark streets toward his next target, the Gestapo headquarters, the SS command building. This was the most dangerous place in the city, the most heavily defended. The meanest Germans were there, but if he could hit them, if he could make them panic too, the word would spread. The whole garrison would start to crack. It was 1:30 in the morning when he reached the building. It was 3 stories tall, narrow, built of old brick, 1 front door, guards outside. Major couldn't attack from the front, too exposed, too defended. He went around to the back, found a fire escape. Metal stairs going up the outside of the building. He climbed slowly, carefully. The metal was wet and slippery, rain kept falling. His hands were cold. He climbed to the 3rd floor, found a window, looked inside. He could see a hallway, doors on both sides. Officer quarters. The top SS men slept here. Major pulled a grenade, smashed the window with his gun barrel, threw the grenade in. He didn't wait to see what happened. He was already climbing down the fire escape as fast as he could. The grenade exploded above him. The blast was muffled by walls, but he felt the building shake. Glass rained down. Men started screaming. He jumped the last 6 feet to the ground, ran to the front of the building. The guards at the front door were confused, looking up, trying to figure out what the explosion was. Major came around the corner and shot them both. Before they could react, they fell in the doorway. Germans started pouring out of the building, running from the fire and smoke inside. Major was waiting for them. He fired from the side, from the shadows. The Germans scattered. Some fell. Others ran in every direction. An SS officer in his undershirt stumbled out, trying to understand what was happening. Major shot him too, grabbed his Luger pistol, grabbed papers from his pockets. Then he ran around to the back again. He found German fuel cans stored near the back door, gasoline for their vehicles. He emptied 2 cans through the broken ground floor windows, lit a match, threw it in. The gasoline caught with a whoosh. Flames climbed the walls inside. Now the building was really burning. Black smoke poured from every window. Germans kept running out, coughing, trying to escape. Major watched from across the street. The Gestapo headquarters was on fire. Flames lit up the whole area. The fire would be visible from across the city. Every German position would see it. They would know something terrible was happening. And that's when the cascade started. German positions across Zwolle had heard the explosions. They'd heard the gunfire. Now they saw the fire, their headquarters burning. Radio messages flew back and forth, panicked voices. "We're under attack! Canadians everywhere! We're surrounded!" None of it was true. It was one man. But they didn't know that. In the darkness and chaos, it seemed real. Major heard trucks starting. Germans were loading up, getting ready to run. He smiled. It was working. His impossible plan was actually working. At 2:15, a man appeared from a doorway. Not a German, a Dutch man. He wore regular clothes, but he had a rifle. Dutch resistance. He'd been fighting the Germans in secret for years. He looked at Major, looked at the burning building, looked at the one-eyed Canadian soldier standing there alone. "Are you alone?" he asked in French. Most educated Dutch people spoke French. "For now," Major said, "but they don't know that." The resistance fighter smiled, a big smile. "The Germans are fleeing, all over the city. You're doing it, one man." "Then help me make more noise," Major said. "Ring the church bells, all of them. Make them think the whole Canadian army is here." The Dutchman nodded and ran off. 5 minutes later, church bells started ringing all across Zwolle. Loud, urgent, the sound of liberation, or the sound of attack, depending on who was listening. For the Germans, it was the sound of defeat. At 3 in the morning, the German garrison commander made his decision. He ordered a full evacuation. All troops withdraw to the east. Across the bridges, leave the city. The Canadians had infiltrated with at least a battalion, maybe more. Staying meant being surrounded and destroyed. Better to retreat and fight another day. That's what he told himself. German soldiers abandoned their positions. They left weapons, left equipment, left food. They just ran. Trucks rolled toward the eastern bridges loaded with SS troops who looked over their shoulders, expecting Canadian soldiers to appear any second. Major followed them. He reached the last checkpoint at 4 a.m. The German commander was there, supervising the final withdrawal. About 30 soldiers were left. They were the rear guard, the last ones out. Major stepped out of the shadows, raised his Sten gun. The commander saw him, saw the eye patch, saw the Canadian uniform. He put his hands up. He was tired. He was beaten. He didn't want to die. "Tell them to put down their weapons," Major said in his rough German. The commander did. 30 German soldiers dropped their rifles, put their hands up. The sun was starting to come up. First light in the east. The sky was turning gray. Major marched the German commander and his men back toward Canadian lines. One man, one eye, one impossible victory. Major walked back into the Canadian lines at 5:30 in the morning. The sun was just starting to come up. The sky was pink and orange in the east. He was exhausted. His uniform was torn and covered in black gunpowder stains. His eye patch hung crooked on his face. Rain and sweat had washed streaks through the dirt on his cheeks. Blood was on his hands, but it wasn't his blood. It was Willie's blood from when he'd held his friend in that doorway hours ago. Behind Major walked the German commander. Then 30 German soldiers with their hands on their heads. Prisoners. They looked tired too, beaten, scared. They kept glancing back over their shoulders like they expected more Canadian soldiers to appear. They never would have believed the truth. That one man had done this to them. The first Canadian soldier to see Major was the regiment chaplain, Father Drouin. He was making his rounds, bringing coffee to the sentries. He stopped dead when he saw the line of German prisoners. Then he saw a major leading them. The chaplain's mouth fell open. "Leo?" he said. His voice was quiet, shocked. "Where's Willie?" Major stopped walking. He looked at the chaplain. His one good eye was red, maybe from smoke, maybe from crying, maybe from both. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stood there in the growing dawn light. "Willie's dead," Major finally said. His voice was flat, empty. "The city's empty. Cancel the artillery." Then he kept walking, leading his prisoners toward the command post. The chaplain stood there watching him go. He made the sign of the cross, started praying quietly for Willie Arsenault's soul. Major's company commander, Captain Smith, was drinking coffee when Major walked up with the German prisoners. Smith's cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He stared. Then he started shouting orders. Get these prisoners secured. Get someone to debrief them. Get Major some water, some food, a medic. Major gave a simple report. 2 men entered Zwolle at 11:30 p.m. Contact with German patrol at midnight. Willie killed at 12:20 a.m. Continued mission alone. Assaulted German positions across city. 88 SS troops evacuated by 3:00 a.m. City empty. Captured commander and rear guard at 4:00 a.m. Mission complete. Captain Smith just stared at him. You're telling me you cleared an entire city by yourself? Yes, sir. That's impossible. But I did it. So cancel the artillery. There's no one to shoot at. Smith didn't believe it. How could he? But he sent scouts forward at 6:00 a.m. to verify. Major sat on an ammunition crate and waited. Someone brought him coffee. He didn't drink it, just held the warm cup in his cold hands. The scouts came back 30 minutes later. Their report was simple. Zwolle was empty. Not a single German soldier anywhere. Positions abandoned. Weapons left behind. Equipment scattered in the streets. The city was liberated, all of it. And yes, it looked like one man could have done it. The destruction pattern, the abandoned positions, everything pointed to a small force. Maybe just 1 or 2 attackers. The officers gathered around Major. They had questions. So many questions. How did you do it? Where did you attack? How many Germans did you kill? Major answered in short sentences. He was too tired for long explanations. His answers didn't make sense to them. One man doesn't liberate a city. One man doesn't defeat 88 SS troops. It was impossible. But Major had done impossible things before. At 7:00 a.m., a patrol went to recover Willie's body. They found him in the doorway where Major had left him. Still sitting against the wall, eyes closed. The rain had washed some of the blood away, but not all of it. He looked peaceful, like he was sleeping. But he wasn't sleeping. He was 22 years old, and he was dead. They brought him back on a stretcher covered with a blanket. Major was there when they carried him past. He stood up, didn't salute, just stood there watching his friend go by. Someone asked if he wanted to say anything. Major shook his head. He didn't speak for the next 3 hours. Just sat on that ammunition crate staring at nothing. Dutch resistance fighters came to the Canadian lines around 8:00 a.m. They told the same story. One Canadian soldier had attacked the Germans all night, made so much noise it sounded like a whole company. The Germans panicked and ran. The resistance had helped by ringing church bells, but the Canadian had done the real work, alone. The resistance counted the German dead in the streets. 11 SS soldiers killed, all by Major's guns and grenades, and the civilians? 0 dead, not one. 50,000 people lived in Zwolle. They woke up that morning to silence. The Germans were gone, just gone, like ghosts that disappeared in the night. Children came out to play in the streets. Old people cried. Women hugged each other. The city was free, and not one building had been destroyed by artillery. If Major hadn't gone in, if he had just reported back like he was supposed to, the artillery would have started firing at dawn. Hundreds of shells, maybe thousands. The city would have burned, buildings would have collapsed, people would have died in their beds, in their basements, in the streets trying to run. Maybe 2,000 dead, maybe 3,000. No one knows for sure. But Major had saved them all. By mid-morning, Dutch civilians started walking to the Canadian lines. They brought flowers. They brought what little food they had. They wanted to thank the soldiers who freed them. They wanted to meet the men who saved their city. The Canadians told them it was one man, one soldier with one eye. The Dutch people didn't believe it at first. One man? Impossible. But the Canadians swore it was true. An elderly Dutch woman asked to meet him. They brought her to where Major sat. She looked at him, at his eye patch, at his dirty, torn uniform, at his empty face. She started crying. She hugged him, said something in Dutch. he didn't understand. The translator said she was thanking him for saving her grandchildren. Major just nodded, didn't say anything. Captain Smith filed a recommendation for the Victoria Cross. That's the highest medal the British Commonwealth gives. It's for incredible bravery, for doing things that seem impossible. Major definitely qualified. But when Smith told him about the recommendation, Major refused. "I don't want it," he said. "Leo, you earned it. You saved 50,000 people." "I don't care. That general you want to give it to me, he's incompetent. His orders got too many of our men killed. I won't accept a medal from him." Smith tried to argue. Major wouldn't budge, so they gave him the Distinguished Conduct Medal instead. That's the second highest decoration. Major accepted it. Barely. He didn't wear it. Shoved it in his pocket and forgot about it. The German commander was interrogated that afternoon. The intelligence officers asked him questions. "How many Canadians attacked you?" The commander said at least 100, maybe more. A full company for sure. When they told him it was one man, he went pale. He refused to believe it. "Impossible," he kept saying. "Absolutely impossible." We heard explosions from 6 different positions, different weapons, different voices. The interrogator explained Major's tactics. The commander looked sick, defeated by one man. His shame was complete. Other German prisoners said the same thing. They heard a major attack, battalion strength at least. When the truth came out, they just stared. Some got angry, some just looked at the floor. One SS officer said, "If he'd had 10 men, we'd all be dead." As the sun climbed higher, Major finally spoke again. He asked about Willie's family. Did someone write to them? Did they know? Captain Smith said yes. A letter was being sent to Willie's wife in New Brunswick. She had a baby daughter, 9 months old. She'd never really know her father now. Major put his head in his hands. This was the cost. This was always the cost. Victory wasn't free. Freedom wasn't free. Zwolle was liberated. 50,000 people were safe. But Willie Arsenault was dead, and no medal could fix that. The liberation of Zwolle changed things, not just for that one city. For the whole rest of the war in the Netherlands, for how armies thought about fighting, for what soldiers believed was possible. The most important thing was immediate. Zwolle was captured intact, not destroyed. The bridges across the river still stood. The roads were clear. Buildings were whole. When the 1st Canadian Army rolled into the city later that day, they didn't have to rebuild anything. They didn't have to clear rubble. They didn't have to repair bridges. They just kept driving east, chasing the retreating Germans, moving fast. Military historians later figured out that taking Zwolle intact saved 3 to 4 days. Maybe more. 3 days doesn't sound like much. But in war, 3 days means everything. It means more cities liberated, more people saved, more supplies getting through. The Canadian advance sped up because Major had saved those bridges and roads. But the bigger impact was psychological. What Major did spread through both armies like wildfire. Canadian soldiers heard the story within hours. One man, one eye, one city. They couldn't believe it. Then they could. Because it was Léo Major. Of course he did it. The madman of the Chaudière strikes again. It made them braver, made them believe they could do impossible things too. If one man could take a city, what could a whole platoon do? What could a company do? The German army heard a different version of the story. To them, it was a ghost story, a horror story. They started calling Major the One-Eyed Canadian Ghost. Word spread through German units across the Netherlands. One Canadian soldier had infiltrated Zwolle. Made it sound like a battalion was attacking. Drove out 88 SS troops without firing a shot. Well, not without firing shots, but you understand. The Germans couldn't figure out how he did it. That made it worse. If they couldn't understand it, they couldn't defend against it. How do you fight ghosts? German units started surrendering faster after Zwolle. When Canadian forces approached the next Dutch city, some German commanders just left, pulled out before the attack even started. Why wait? If the Canadians could infiltrate like that, if one man could do so much damage, what was the point of defending? Better to retreat, better to survive. The war was almost over anyway. Some German officers actually cited Zwolle in their reports when they ordered retreats. We cannot risk another Zwolle situation. They wrote that. Put it in official documents. One man's action became a reason for entire garrisons to abandon positions. That had never happened before in military history. One soldier's exploit becoming strategic policy. The Canadian command noticed. They started training other soldiers in majors' tactics. Two-man reconnaissance teams. Deep infiltration. Psychological warfare. Make noise. Make the enemy think you're bigger than you are. Use darkness and chaos. Strike fast, move fast, never stop moving. Major became the model. Soldiers studied what he did, how he moved, how he thought. They even gave it a name. The Léo Major Principle. It meant that sometimes psychological warfare was more effective than firepower. Sometimes scaring the enemy was better than killing them. Sometimes audacity beats strength. It sounds obvious now. But in 1945, it was revolutionary. Armies fought with tanks and artillery and thousands of men. Major fought with grenades and lies and one eye, and he won. The liberation of the Netherlands sped up after Zwolle. The Canadian forces liberated city after city with minimal destruction. They didn't have to bombard everyone. The Germans were already running, already broken. Zwolle had shown them what would happen if they stayed, so they didn't stay. They retreated, and Dutch cities remained standing. Military historians later calculated the impact. 50,000 people in Zwolle saved from bombardment. But Major's action saved more than just Zwolle. Other cities would have been bombed too. Other cities would have been destroyed. By showing there was another way, by proving infiltration could work, Major saved thousands more lives across the Netherlands. Some historians say 100,000 people. Some say more. The exact number doesn't matter. It was a lot, a whole lot, and the food, that mattered too. The Dutch were starving. 20,000 had already died during the hunger winter. Every day mattered. Every hour mattered. The faster the Canadians liberated cities, the faster food aid could get through. Major's action sped up the liberation by days, maybe a week. How many people didn't starve because food arrived a week earlier? Hundreds? Thousands? No one knows, but they lived. That's what matters. The story reached the highest levels. British Field Marshal Montgomery heard about it. Montgomery had commanded millions of men in World War II. He'd seen everything. He called Zwolle the most improbable victory I've witnessed. Coming from Montgomery, that meant something. He'd seen D-Day. He'd seen the Battle of El Alamein. He'd seen it all. And this impressed him. American General Eisenhower's staff requested a full report. They wanted to know exactly what happened, exactly how Major did it. They wanted to see if it could be repeated, if it could be taught. The report went all the way to Eisenhower's headquarters in France. The supreme commander of all Allied forces in Europe read about a one-eyed Canadian corporal who took a city alone. The Soviets didn't believe it at first. They thought it was Western propaganda. One man takes a city, ridiculous, impossible, capitalist lies. But then they captured German records during their advance into Germany. The records confirmed everything. The German reports matched the Canadian reports. The Soviets had to admit it was true. Even they were impressed. and the Soviets didn't impress easily. After the war, military schools studied Zwolle. The Canadian Forces Staff College made it a case study. Officers analyzed what Major did. They taught it to new lieutenants and captains. This is what initiative looks like. This is what audacity can achieve. NATO Special Forces studied it too. Even today, elite soldiers learn about Léo Major and what he did in Zwolle. The Germans studied it too, but for different reasons. German military historians analyzed it as a disaster, as a failure, as a cautionary tale. Their conclusion was simple. The garrison commander should have verified the attacker strength before retreating. He panicked. He assumed. He didn't send scouts to check. That was his mistake. But the German analysts also admitted something else. Major's tactics were brilliant. He exploited every German fear. Fear of encirclement, fear of being cut off, fear of dying in a war that was already lost. He understood psychology. He understood what scared men do, and he used that knowledge like a weapon. German training manuals after the war emphasized one lesson from Zwolle. Verify before you withdraw. Don't panic. Don't assume. Check the facts. But everyone reading those manuals knew the truth. In darkness and chaos, verification is hard, sometimes impossible, and sometimes audacity wins before verification can happen. The war in Europe ended 24 days after Zwolle, April 14th to May 8th, less than a month. Major's action came near the end, but it mattered. Those 24 days mattered to the Dutch people still starving, still dying. Every day of freedom was precious. Every day without German occupation was a gift. Major gave them that gift. The war ended for Léo Major 3 weeks after Zwolle. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. Major was there when the German forces in the Netherlands officially gave up. He watched them lay down their weapons, watched them march into prisoner camps. He didn't feel happy. He didn't feel victorious. He just felt tired. Willie was still dead. All the Germans surrendering couldn't change that. Major went home to Canada in September 1945. He was 24 years old. He'd been fighting for 5 years. He'd lost an eye. He'd seen friends die. He'd killed men. He'd done impossible things. Now he had to figure out how to live a normal life. That was harder than fighting. He tried different jobs, worked as a pipe fitter, did construction, worked in factories. Nothing felt right. He couldn't settle down, couldn't sleep well. Every night he dreamed about Willie falling in that alley, about the burning buildings in Zwolle, about all the things he'd seen and done. Today we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Back then they just called it shell shock or didn't call it anything at all. You were just supposed to deal with it. Be a man, move on. Major started drinking. Too much. Way too much. He got married. The marriage failed. He got married again. That failed too. He was angry all the time, couldn't hold down jobs, couldn't hold his family together. The war was over, but it wasn't over for him. It lived in his head, in his dreams, in every loud noise that made him jump. Then, in 1950, another war started. Korea, communist North Korea invaded South Korea. The United Nations sent troops to help. Canada sent soldiers. Major was 29 years old. He re-enlisted. Joined the Royal 22e Regiment, another French-Canadian unit. People asked him why he'd go back to war. He said he didn't know how to do anything else. Fighting was what he was good at. In November 1951, Major's company defended a hill in Korea. They called it Hill 355. Some called it Little Gibraltar because it was so hard to capture. The Chinese army attacked with thousands of soldiers. Major's company had 18 men, just 18. The Chinese kept coming in waves. Major grabbed every weapon he could find, rifles, machine guns, grenades. He fired until the barrels glowed red hot. The Chinese kept coming. Major kept fighting, for hours. When morning came, the hill was still in Canadian hands. Dead Chinese soldiers covered the slopes. Estimates said Major had killed 40 or more by himself. Maybe more. No one counted exactly. They wanted to evacuate him. He was wounded, exhausted. He refused, said he'd leave when everyone else left. They gave him another Distinguished Conduct Medal, his second one. He became the only Canadian soldier to ever receive the medal twice, and in 2 different wars, Korea and World War II. No one else ever did that. Major came home from Korea in 1953. He was 32 years old now. Something had changed. Maybe Korea had been enough. Maybe he'd gotten the war out of his system. Maybe he was just too tired to fight anymore. He remarried. This time it worked. He settled in Montreal, had children, lived quietly. He worked regular jobs and tried not to think about the war too much. For decades, Major barely talked about what he'd done. His kids grew up not knowing their father was a war hero. He didn't tell them, didn't want to talk about it. When people asked about his eye patch, he just said it was a war injury and changed the subject. The medals stayed in a drawer somewhere. He never wore them, but the Dutch people didn't forget. In the 1970s, the Dutch government tracked Major down. They wanted to honor him, wanted him to come to Zwolle for liberation ceremonies. At first, Major said no, but they kept asking. Finally, in the 1980s, he went. He was an old man now, gray hair, still wearing that eye patch. He walked through Zwolle and people recognized him. They came up to him in the streets. Old people who remembered that night in 1945. They hugged him, thanked him, cried. Their children and grandchildren were alive because of him. Major visited Zwolle multiple times over the years. Every time, the Dutch people treated him like royalty, like a hero. He was uncomfortable with it. He kept saying Willie was the real hero. Willie was the brave one who volunteered knowing they'd probably die. Major said he just got lucky, just survived. That's all. But the Dutch people knew better. They knew what he'd done. 50,000 people lived in Zwolle in 1945. By the 2000s, their children and grandchildren numbered in the hundreds of thousands. All of them owed their existence in part to one Canadian soldier who refused to let their city be destroyed. Willie Arsenault's story had a different ending. His body went home to New Brunswick. They buried him with full military honors. His wife received his medals. His daughter grew up with a photograph of her father in his uniform. She never really knew him. She was 9 months old when he died, but she knew he'd died liberating a Dutch city. Died trying to save people. That meant something. In Zwolle, they remembered both men. Every commemoration mentioned Major and Arsenault together. The Dutch people understood. 2 men went in. Only one came back. Both were heroes. Both mattered. Jan de Vries was 12 years old in April 1945. He lived in Zwolle with his family. He remembered waking up to explosions in the night. His parents had rushed him and his siblings to the basement. They huddled there in the dark, terrified. Then silence. Morning came. The Germans were gone. Years later, John said, "We thought a whole Canadian army had come. When we learned it was one man, we couldn't believe it. One man saved our whole city, saved us." Maria van der Berg was 8 years old that night. She remembered her mother crying when she learned one soldier had saved them. "My mother said angels existed. I think she was right." Peter Kuiper was in the Dutch resistance. He was the one who helped Major by ringing the church bells. He said, "I helped make noise." But Leo did the impossible part. He was the bravest man I ever met. The German commander who surrendered lived until the 1970s. Reporters found him and asked about Zwolle. He said, "It was my greatest shame. I retreated from one man." But in that moment, with the explosions and the fire and the confusion, It seemed impossible he was alone. Maybe I should have checked. Maybe I should have stayed. But I wanted to live. The war was ending, and that Canadian made us believe we were surrounded. Major's fellow soldiers remembered him differently. One said, Leo was crazy, but smart crazy. He understood fear. He knew how to use it. Another said, best soldier I ever served with. Also the most stubborn. Major's daughter said years later, Father never talked about the war. It made him too sad. He'd just say Willie should be the hero. Willie died. Father just survived. Léo Major died in 2008. He was 87 years old. They gave him a full military funeral in Montreal. The Dutch ambassador came and spoke. He said Major was a hero to the Dutch people, that they would never forget him, never forget what he did. In 2005, the city of Zwolle did something special. They renamed one of their main streets. It became Léo Major, Major Street, a whole street named after the one-eyed Canadian soldier who saved their city 60 years earlier. The street sign went up on a sunny spring day. Dutch officials stood there with Canadian diplomats. Old people who remembered 1945 came to watch. Some of them cried. 3 years later, in 2008, Zwolle unveiled a bronze statue. It stands in a small park near the city center. The statue shows a soldier in Canadian uniform holding a Sten gun. He wears an eye patch over his left eye. The statue faces east, the direction the Germans fled. At the base, an inscription reads in both Dutch and English, one soldier, one night, one city saved, Léo Major and Willie Arsno, April 14th, 1945. Every year on April 14th, Zwolle holds a ceremony at that statue. Dutch families come. They lay flowers at the base. The Canadian ambassador always attends. Sometimes Canadian soldiers come, wearing their dress uniforms. They stand at attention while someone reads the story of what happened that night. Children from local schools come to listen. They learn about the one-eyed soldier who saved their city. They learn that one person can make a difference. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. The Dutch and Canadian flags fly together in Zwolle on Liberation Day. Orange, white, and blue next to the red maple leaf. The flags remind everyone of the bond between the two countries, a bond written in blood and sacrifice. Canadian soldiers died liberating the Netherlands. The Dutch people never forgot. Every year, the Netherlands sends 20,000 tulip bulbs to Canada. A gift, a thank you. Those tulips bloom in Ottawa every spring, red and yellow and pink flowers that remember what Canadians did in 1945. Zwolle became a sister city to several Canadian cities. Students from Zwolle and Canada exchange letters, visit each other, learn each other's languages. Dutch children visit Canada and see where Major grew up. Canadian children visit Zwolle and see the statue, the street, the city one man saved. These connections keep the story alive, keep the friendship strong. In 2008, after Major died, the Netherlands did something else. They gave him their highest honor, the Knight of the Order of Orange Nassau. It's given to people who did extraordinary things for the Dutch people. Major received it posthumously after his death. His family accepted it at the funeral. The Dutch ambassador said Major was a hero to the Dutch nation, that generations of Dutch families existed because of him. Canada honored Major too. The Canadian War Museum in Ottawa features his story, a whole display about the liberation of Zwolle. Visitors can see his uniform, his weapons, his medals. They can read about what he did. School groups visit and learn about Canadian military history, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Major's story is now part of Canada's national identity, part of what it means to be Canadian. Courage, sacrifice, and doing what's right even when it seems impossible. The Quebec government created an award in Major's name, the Léo Major Award for Military Valor. They give it to Quebec soldiers who show exceptional courage. Every recipient learns Major's story. They learn about the standard they're being measured against. One man, one city, one impossible night. Major's story spread beyond museums and memorials. Filmmakers made documentaries about him. Books were written. Television shows featured his exploits. Even video games referenced him. A whole new generation learned about the one-eyed Canadian who liberated Zwolle. Young people who weren't born until decades after the war. They played games and watched videos and said, "That really happened? One guy did that?" Yes, one guy really did that. Military schools around the world still study what Major did. Special forces units analyze his tactics, the psychological warfare, the audacity, the understanding of fear and how to use it. Modern soldiers train in infiltration techniques that Major invented. They learn that sometimes creativity beats firepower, that sometimes one determined person can achieve what an army cannot. The deeper meaning of Zwolle isn't just about military tactics. It's about what humans can do when everything is on the line. Major lost his best friend. He was alone in enemy territory. He could have gone back, reported Willie's death, let the artillery do its work. No one would have blamed him. That was the safe choice, the reasonable choice. But he didn't take it. He took the impossible choice, the crazy choice. He decided that 50,000 lives mattered more than his own safety, that Willie's death had to mean something, that he couldn't let those Dutch families die without trying everything, even something that shouldn't work. And somehow it worked. 50,000 people woke up on April 14th, 1945, and they were free. Their city stood intact. Their homes weren't rubble. Their children weren't dead. Because one soldier decided to try the impossible. The story raises questions. Would Major have attempted it if Willie hadn't died? Probably not. The grief, the rage, the desperation, that's what pushed him forward. Sometimes tragedy creates transformation. Sometimes loss creates action. Willie's death saved a city. That's hard to think about, hard to accept. But it's true. Was Major crazy or brave? Maybe both. Maybe there's no difference when bullets are flying and friends are dying. Maybe sanity is knowing when to be a little insane, when to ignore the odds and the rules and just do what needs doing. How many other impossible victories never happened because no one tried? How many cities were destroyed because no soldier thought to do what Major did? We'll never know. But Zwolle stands as proof that trying matters, that audacity can win, that one person really can change everything. In 2006, 2 years before he died, Major gave an interview. He was 85 years old, still wearing his eye patch. His hand shook a little when he talked. A reporter asked him why he did it. Why risk everything for a city full of strangers? Major was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I wasn't thinking about being a hero. I was thinking about Willie, about those Dutch families sleeping in their homes, about how much I hated the Germans for all of it. Sometimes you're so angry, so sad, you just do things, and somehow it works." The reporter asked if he was proud of what he did. Major shook his head. Willie was the hero. He volunteered knowing we'd probably die. I just got lucky. I survived. He didn't. That's what I think about. At Major's funeral in 2008, a Dutch woman spoke. She was in her 70s. She'd been a child in Zwolle in 1945. She said, "Mr. Major saved my parents that night," which means he saved me, and my children, and my grandchildren. One man's night of violence gave life to thousands of people who wouldn't exist otherwise. How do you thank someone for that? You can't. You just remember. You tell the story. You make sure no one forgets. Every April 14th, the sun rises over Zwolle, Netherlands. Light touches the bronze statue of the one-eyed soldier. Dutch children on their way to school pass by. Some stop to look. Some read the inscription. Some ask their parents who this soldier was. And the parents tell them. They tell them about the night in 1945, about the Canadian who saved their city, about courage and sacrifice and doing the impossible. The statue stands there, facing east holding his rifle, ready, watching, remembering, a permanent reminder that one person can change the world, that sometimes all it takes is someone willing to try, that heroes don't always wear capes or command armies. Sometimes they wear eye patches and carry grenades and refuse to give up even when everything says they should. And beside that statue, every spring, tulips bloom, red and yellow and pink, beautiful flowers growing in soil that could have been rubble, in a city that could have been ash, but isn't, because of Léo Major, because of Willie Arsenault. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible happens,